Hey, it's Max again. In the last video, we deployed a Java app to Amazon Elastic Beanstalk. In this episode, in this video, I'm going to be deploying an app to Heroku, which is a hosting provider I kind of prefer over Amazon Web Services. It's a little bit more simple. What we'll be doing here is we'll be working with this very simplistic Dropwizard app. If you haven't heard of Dropwizard before, it's a very nifty, very minimal Java web framework. First things first, though, we're going to give this a clone. We're going to go to our terminal. We're going to clone it. And what we'll want to do is, I'm using IntelliJ, so we'll import the project and select the build.gradle file. We'll open it as project. This picks up all of the dependencies from the build.gradle file, installs them. So just to illustrate how minimal this app really is there's only two Java classes. One is bootstrapping the Dropwizard app, and the second is defining a resource that's mounted at the root URL. There's a few different URL paths that work for us. Let's load our Gradle app, and you can see most importantly there's a shadow jar task which will create our fat jar that will deploy to Heroku. If you haven't already, I'd recommend creating a Heroku account. I don't believe you need to provide a credit card or payment. But first things first, we have this empty Heroku app. I'm going to Google real quick deploying Java on Heroku. We'll check out their getting started guide. You can see I've actually already been through it before. We're using Gradle, excuse me. So we'll check out the Gradle guide. You'll need to have installed the Heroku command line interface. I'll include a link in the show notes, but it's a command line tool that allows you to control your Heroku app. You can either use the command line tool, which they seem to require for this tutorial, or you can just use the web interface that they provide as a dashboard. But we're all set there. They're working with an example app. We're going to use our own. We've already created our app in the dashboard, but you can go ahead and do it if you need to. We'll need to push our code, something that we haven't done yet, and that we're not prepared to do yet because we haven't defined a proc file. So similar to our previous videos, the way to run our actual app is to invoke java-jar and then the path to our fat jar, which runs our Dropwizard app. What happened here when we ran the shadow jar task is in our build libs directory, there's now a Dropwizard example jar file. And this is what we want to deploy to Heroku and have Heroku run for us. So we need to create a new file in the project root. And we need to name it explicitly proc file. We'll just make it a text file. And we'll add it to Git because we're going to need to push our code to Heroku. Heroku popularized the method of deploying code using your version control tool, Git in this case. So rather than this being the name of our jar, we need to get the name. Let's see if that copied the name. It did. All set there. This declares a single process type. Looks good. We need to be able to pass in the port number, though, of our app. Heroku works by inferring what type of application you're deploying when you push your code to them. And they'll run different build tasks depending on the frameworks it detects. So we're not using Spring Boot, we're not using Wrappack. Let's give it a try and see if it can figure out what is our web framework. If you need to customize your build, you can create a staged task in your build.gradle file. If this task is present, Heroku will run it in favor of any framework defaults. So we'll see if they have Dropwizard as a default in just a moment by pushing. So now that we have our Dropwizard Gradle app, you can see we've made a couple of changes. Most importantly is adding the proc file, so we'll commit the proc file and commit it. Give it a name, give the commit a name. What we haven't done yet is we haven't specified Git remote. So if we list our Git remotes, you can see that there's the GitHub repo for this project. But what we'll need to do is we'll need to run Heroku git remote. And what this will do is when we run git remote -v again, you'll see now there's a Heroku remote. So if we, instead of what you might be most familiar with running is git push origin master, we'll do git push Heroku master. And this will kick off a build on Heroku's servers. It detects that there's a Gradle app, detects or it runs JDK8. It's executing the stage task, which might not be what we want, or we might need to modify our Gradle wrapper or our Gradle task definitions to override what stage does exactly. So we may need to, so it says build failed with an exception, task stage not found. So we're going to need to make one small edit to our build.gradle in our project root, right? And that's to add a new task definition. Build clean. Task stage depends on build clean. What we'll want to do is shadow jar clean. And we'll modify this to be shadow jar must run after clean. So just to verify that we can do this locally, let's run Gradle w stage and verify that it creates the jar we want. One thing we can do really quick to re-verify it is we can create a new path here, and we'll say the root URL, we'll call it index. We need to rename the function or the method so that it's different. We'll run stage one more time. Once it's built the jar, we'll try running it. And we'll need to specify server is the command we want ran. You can see by default it listens on port 8080. So if we go to localhost 8080, you'll see there's index. What we'll need to do is one more thing is we'll need to modify the proc file, because I forgot with Dropwizard, it's not just specifying the java-jar in the file name. We also need to provide the command we want ran by Heroku. One last thing, like I was mentioning about the port number, is that Heroku dynamically provides us the port number. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to look up how port number is configured by your Dropwizard app. Or we can just search Heroku Dropwizard port. And I'm sure that somebody has covered this before. Perfect. The Dropwizard framework accepts a Java system property, so we can just add this to our proc file. So we'll come back to our IntelliJ, and in addition to specifying server, we'll add -d server.application connectors $port. And what we can do in the terminal is that the Heroku command line interface actually makes it easy to test out your proc file by running Heroku local. And you'll see it has an unrecognized arguments. I think I've got the ordering of things wrong. We'll need to specify this option before invoking -jar. Let's come back and run Heroku local. Now it works. You can see it's listening on port 5000, which I guess that's what I've set port to in our case. Or let's try setting port here to 5001 and see whether it works. Yep, it picks up the port number and is listening on port 5001, and we can verify that by coming to our browser and trying hitting 5001. Sweet. So that being said, I think we should be all set. We have a few different things we've changed. One is we've modified the proc file, both to specify passing through of the port number that Heroku wants our app to listen to, and also specifying the server command at the end here. We also had to add a stage task, which creates our shadow jar. So we're not actually going to be uploading our jar file like we did in the previous video. We're going to actually leave it up to Heroku to build our jar by invoking Gradle. And last but not least is that we added a root URL. So let's say fix proc file. Now similarly, we can git push Heroku master like we did before, but this time I'm hoping it works. Detects the Gradle app because we have our build.gradle file. It looks like it downloads Gradle version 6.1.1. It's invoking the stage task, which we've defined. Once it's built the jar, it's just going to invoke the jar and start running our app, and we should be able to access it from the domain name of our Heroku app. Sweet, build was successful. See some warnings about deprecation. Here Heroku is creating what's called a slug, which is a machine image that has our Java jar baked into it, and it's releasing our app to this hostname. It should be done in just a moment. It might be taking a little bit longer because it is the first time we've done so, but there's our app. We got it. We can access /hello. We can access index. That was it. Not too bad, right? I'll be pushing this to origin master, which is GitHub, and you guys can take a look. Try this out for yourselves with your own Heroku accounts. Create an issue if you have issues, or comment and like on the video. Looking forward to making more with you guys. Talk to you soon.